Hello and you're welcome back to this week's Unfiltered Autistic Podcast. And this week on the podcast, I am joined by Lisa Galley, former SLT, parent and autism consultant. And I suppose what I admire most about Lisa, above all of the incredible qualifications and experiences that she has, is that she is a parent to 3 neurodivergent children. And I suppose her children are older now. And often when I chat to parents, I always feel like I'm the parent of the older children. So for the first time on the podcast, I'm talking to another incredible parent, but also a parent who has children older than my own, so has so much life experience to talk about. So for any of our listeners, Lisa, would you mind, I suppose, letting them know a little bit more about yourself? And thank you for being here with me.
Thanks, Amanda. That's a lovely intro. Yeah, as you say, I've got 3 autistic children. My eldest is 32. It makes me feel so old. And then I have a 22-year-old and a 26-year-old. So, yeah, I mean, now you might know me as School Run Mum on Instagram, where I've got a community of parents. I'm work as an autism consultant, mainly online with parents, kind of right in the thick of it. I was a former speech and language therapist for many years. I worked in autism outreach teams as well, working with children in schools that were at risk of exclusion, autistic children that were at risk of exclusion. And yeah, this kind of career I do now kind of happened almost accidentally. So I left my career in the NHS due to burnout, and then started talking on Instagram about autism, and it kind of just grew. And now we have this amazing community around us, which I'm really, really blessed to have. And yeah, I mean, my mission really, if I was to say, is to really change the conversation around parenting autistic children. And that's really led to me writing a book about it that's coming out in August, where I share my story. I share stories of amazing parents that I've worked with, in the hope that parents will feel less shame and guilt about the way we parent our kids, because it goes very much against the neurotypical parenting advice that we get. So that's a very convoluted way, Amanda. I'm so sorry explaining who I am and what I do. So I hope that makes sense.
It makes absolute sense, but I think you haven't given yourself enough. I think my daughter's, which is an adult now, she would say it's called snaps. Like, you haven't given yourself enough credence for how incredible you are. I was very privileged to read, I suppose, an early copy of your book, and I was chatting to you just before the start of the call about this. What I loved about it is that it's so real, raw, authentic, but I can see your arc of parenting, how you say about where you started off to where you are today. And you also talk about PDA, you talk about nervous system differences, you talk about being neuroaffirmative, moving away from expectations to parenting the way that your child, who they are, what they need. So I suppose, Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about your brand new book, Parenting Your Autistic Child? It's, I suppose, having permission to parent differently. Do you want to talk a little bit about your own, I suppose, where you started out as a parent, and I suppose where you are today and all of the learnings that you've had along the way, and how that has kind of influenced the incredible book that you've written?
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite a journey. I had my first child when I was 18. He was born on my 18th birthday. So I was a baby, really. And I think I started to realise that parenting wasn't what I expected it was going to be. But of course, I had nothing to compare it to. And when I had my second child, it was when he was born, really, that I could just tell straight away that something was different. And I hear lots of parents who say they knew from a baby that their child was autistic, and people scoff about that, but I can absolutely see that. And so because of my third child, not my second child, I was kind of searching to find out, why is this child so different? And when I went on that journey, I realised then that my first child was autistic as well. So they both got diagnosed within 12 months of each other. So my first child was 10 when he got his diagnosis, and then my third child was 2.5. So quite young compared to like these days for a diagnosis. And it was then that I sort of went on a real journey about changing how I parented, because I was so burnt out. I was so exhausted with trying to parent in the way that I was expected to. So things like, screen time, and they had very restrictive diets. And I felt so guilty about, cooking the same chicken nuggets every night. But I knew that it was what kept them regulated and kept them happy. And so I got to a point, I think, where I just was so burnt out from parenting to other people's expectations that I just thought, I won't swear, but F it, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do what works. And from that point onwards, I really went on a journey to learn about my kids. I was also working with autistic kids and training. So all of that kind of came together at the same time, really. And even in my career, I was finding that the advice we were giving parents as speech and language therapists or as autism consultants really went against or went the opposite way to what I was experiencing. So there was that kind of friction as well from a professional perspective. And then I hit catastrophic burnout when my kids they'd just gone to secondary school and they were really struggling with school, and we had a lot of school avoidance, and it was pretty bad. And I just couldn't manage, the load, the mother's load, and also holding in a career. And so I hit burnout, and it was almost when they were settled then that my nervous system just gave in. And from that point onwards, really, I just was determined to educate myself and other people about actually how, as parents, when we're trying to parent for other people, we're going to burn out. We're going to, it's not good for our health. It's not good for our mental health. And so I went on a, I suppose you could say, trying to think of the right word for it. I wanted to kind of create an army around me of other parents that we could kind of stand up and change that conversation and say, actually, our kids have, their nervous system is different, their brain is different. That's not a bad thing. And in a way, it's not even a good thing. It's just a neutral thing. Or different brains need different parenting. And we know our kids' nervous systems are so hypervigilant to the world around them that the things we do as parents, naturally, our instinct that we do is to actually help our kids with that predictability that then, soothes their nervous system. And that's why it works. And I think that's the missing piece for me, is parents know instinctively how to parent their autistic kids. They know what works, but often they don't know why it works. And part of my book really is it's giving that permission to parent that way, but it's also giving them that confidence and that education to say, this is why it works, so that they can stand strong in their decisions and their parenting. And I think that makes a really big difference to parents, that when they know why something works, they've got that confidence then to stand up and say, no, I am going to do this. I am going to allow them to have more screen time, regardless of what the media says, regardless of what I'm hearing, because I know that's regulating for my child. So I think I've even forgotten what the question was you asked me, but kind of that's kind of my journey.
No, but you captured it all there so well. I think I actually, my ADHD is like, what was my exact question? I suppose my whole interest is like, where did you come up with this incredible idea for the book? But I suppose it's like you say, and just reading the book, it's like the arc of the parenting journey. And when you were chatting there, what I kept thinking about was, the phrase, I probably have this wrong now, parenting against, or like work going against the grain. Yeah. Like the grain is telling you this is the way you parent. But you were learning professionally, you were learning personally, you were experiencing burnout, that actually what societal expectations tell you is the right way, inverted commas, the right way to do things. You were finding in real time, actually, that doesn't work for my children. My children are neurologically, literally different. So and it's not an easy thing to do, because you were both the professional and the parent, to push back against what you knew can work for many people, especially people that are neurotypical, but did not work for your children because they were neurodivergent. So I suppose what I was thinking about there was that, I suppose, pushing back against that grain, but also you probably, do you think, and again, I don't want to make an assumption, do you feel like you were facing judgments and attitudes earlier on in your parenting journey, because you were also an SLT, so you also had that clinical experience, and you knew whatever it would say that the recommendations were at that time, which may not have been for a variety of reasons. Your affirmatives were going a little bit back in time. So do you feel like you were facing a lot of judgments and attitudes, and maybe how did you help yourself overcome that?
Yeah, and I think it's not a one-time thing. I think it's something that I had to work at, and I think all parents have to work at literally every day, growing that thick skin. It just doesn't happen overnight. It's actually standing up and again being brave enough to say, this works and I'm going to do this. And actually, one of the things that I find with parents that come to me, the first thing that we work on is actually trusting their instincts, because I think when we're judged so often by family, by friends, not always necessarily deliberately to be upsetting, but often we've got really close relationships with people who are judging our decision making, and that can be really hard to put boundaries in place and say, actually, we're not going to come over and bring the children today because that's going to upset them, or we're not going to do this. And that's a big piece of work that I do with parents. And we talk about actually being brave enough to do that every day, and it builds and it builds and it builds, and that skin gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And again, that's something I talk about in the book, is about actually those little times where we can let go of things. And I think that's a really big part of the permission to parent differently, is actually letting go of those expectations, but also letting go of the things that we expected as parents, what we thought it was going to be like. And that can be really hard. And I think actually we need to almost address that and say, yes, I am grieving the life I thought it was going to be. I'm grieving the fact that my partner or my mother-in-law doesn't get me or doesn't understand. So I think for me, and also for the parents I work with, I think it's something we have to do and continue to do. Like, even now my children are adults, we're going through a new phase with my kids. My eldest son's 32, but I'm also experiencing a different stage of parenting, because with an autistic child, we don't kind of take things for granted. It isn't just 18, tick, done, which I know it isn't with many children. But there are things with my kids as adults that I'm learning for the first time. So I'm still going through that journey. I'm still having to, give myself that permission to let go of things. So I think, to answer your question, I think it is something that we are continuing to do. And that's why I think if we can create this community, if we can change that conversation, and that's why the book is so important to me, because I feel like if that book could get into the hands of every parent who had just had a child diagnosed, or even was thinking about their child might be autistic, and we could start earlier with actually giving the parents that permission to parent differently, I really believe that as a society we can change that perspective. And that's a big job, and I'm not going to do it on my own, but I think that's my little part of the world, my little part of social media. If I can do that and give parents that courage and that confidence, then I'm happy. That's a big tick for me.
Do you know what I was thinking as you were talking? I was saying to myself, gosh, because my 4 children are autistic, but my eldest son would have been, so I'm here in the west of Ireland, for anyone that's listening, say outside of Ireland, but back in the day, you're referencing your gorgeous, sorry, I call them puddings, just a whole Irish thing, my gorgeous children. So when you were saying when you're gorgeous, 2 of your children were kind of diagnosed within, was it 12 months of each other, so and still very, very young. My gorgeous Connor would have been in Mayo, which is a county in Ireland, one of the youngest children ever in the county diagnosed as autistic. So he was diagnosed before he was 1. And while you were talking there, I was saying to myself, God, I could have done with a Lisa in my life. I remember that day. Now, he was just because he had a medical condition as well. He was diagnosed on the baby ward in the hospital. But I remember just being like, what do I do? I heard they just told me this word autism, and I remember leaving the hospital. I felt like I was carrying it with me. I was carrying Connor, but I was carrying the word, and I was like, but where do I start now? And I don't know what it was like for yourself, but back in the day there wasn't many great books around. But I felt really emotional when you were talking there, because I was thinking, God, I wish there was a Lisa in my life. I wish there was this incredible book that I could have said to somebody, my child is autistic, and they'd say, this is the book, start here. Oh God, goosebumps. Start here, read this book, start here. And it would have, because you have had such that word I can never say, longevity. I'm sure I've said that wrong. You can never say it. You've had the full, and as you say, you're still learning all the things, but you've been there for many, many years before many of us. So you've gone through a lot of that trajectory. I know, as you say, you're still learning. Your children are adults now, but there's so much to learn all the time. But I feel like you have what I feel like I'm developing now, and I say this with the height of positivity. I feel like I'm a little bit untouchable now from a lot of parenting judgment, because I've been through the mill. I've had some horrendous things said to me intentionally, some horrendous things said unintentionally, with meaning no harm, experienced some horrible experiences, not because of my children, just judgments, attitudes. So I genuinely feel like that if, for anyone listening or watching the video format of the podcast, this is definitely a book for if you're a professional, if you're a grandparent, if you're an auntie, an uncle, a friend, if you're the parent, if you're somebody in a medicalised setting. Say, if it is like my experience, my child was diagnosed in a hospital just by chance because of a co-occurring medical condition. If you're a professional here in Ireland, in the HSE, that's like the health service executive. This is a book that I highly recommend, that you recommend to your families, that you give to your friends that maybe have autistic children, that you give to your son or your daughter, that the parent of your grandchild. So I suppose that's what I kind of thought a lot about when you were talking there, was that this book kind of gives you the armour and gives you the experience. And not that I'm saying I'm untouchable because I'm sure tomorrow someone could say something horrendous and I'll be crying in a shop again. But do you know what I mean? I feel like I have the tools and I have the permission to say that's what you expect. But this is, I'm going to go my own path because I know my child, this is what my child needs neurologically, neurobiologically. They're different nervous system to what society expects. This is what they need. I also thought really interesting in the book is that you talk a lot about PDA, and I have 4 children, but two are identified as PDA. Would you like to talk a little bit maybe about your parenting experience on PDA? And for any parents listening, are there any kind of standout advice pieces for parents starting out, maybe learning today that their child is PDA?
Yeah, I mean, PDA for me, in a way, is still quite new, because I had absolutely no idea about PDA when I was parenting. I didn't really understand or know about it when I was working. And I remember working with some children that were amazing children, but I could not understand why the strategies that I was using for other autistic children was not working. In fact, it was making it worse. And then as the years have gone by, I've understood more about PDA, and it's actually looking back that we realised that my eldest son had a PDA profile, and I've learned from some amazing professionals and parents who are in the PDA world, and I've almost healed part of me as a parent, the things that I found really difficult with my son. I'm brutally honest, I think, in the book, and I say with other parents that there are times where I felt like I was in an abusive relationship with my own child, and I say that with love to parents, because it can feel like that, where you are just getting this barrage of negativity from them. But actually, the more that I've learned about PDA and the more that I understand that it is a nervous system difficulty, it is a nervous system disability, and I do use that word when I talk about PDA, because I was seeing that my son was basically having what I would call panic attacks whenever there was the slightest amount of demand put on him, even things that he wanted to do. So I had to completely learn a new way of parenting, and I'm still learning it with him now as an adult. You know, parenting a PDA adult is very interesting. You know, we've got to a stage in our relationship now where we have a really good relationship. But I think it was my ex-husband who actually summed it up best and said, you know, a PDA child will not let you parent them. You cannot be a parent to a PDA child. You have to have that. You have to be part of a team. You have to work together. So advice-wise, I think it's a tricky one because I am still learning so much about PDA. But I think it's about, you've got to almost deconstruct everything that you think about when you're parenting, and you have to not take it personally. You know, it's so hard, I think, because sometimes you can be that person that they are either positively attached to, so you can't even go to the toilet without having them near you, or you can be that parent that they're negatively attached to. And I experienced that, where I was the person that they targeted. So I think that's one thing, is to actually try not to take it personally, try to see it as, you know, a nervous system disability, that they are just panicking, and work with your child as much as possible. And think about, actually, I think a big thing for me was to do with language. And it was actually when I learned about declarative language and actually completely changing how I would talk to my son, and also my tone of voice. Like, he can say to me now as an adult, he could tell in my tone of voice that I want something from him. I only have to say his name a certain way, and he'll be like, you know, you want something from me. So you're constantly on your toes. So the declarative handbook I found was absolutely amazing. That helped me think about how I was talking. And I also think with a PDA child, as a parent, you have to try to give yourself some grace and some time to yourself if you can get it. And I know that's really difficult, but even like little micro moments of space from your child, if you can, I think could be really helpful, because it can be so overwhelming parenting a PDA child. And I know lots of parents that are single parents doing it, and I'm in awe of them. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, Amanda, but as I say, with PDA, hopefully the chapter in the book will help parents.
Honestly, it's so helpful, because I think it's just even hearing from your perspective that, you know, it is okay to feel a little bit overwhelmed. It's okay to
Yeah.
feel like you need a little bit of distance. You're still the incredible parent that you are. You're trying to connect with your child. But it's, I suppose, as you talk about in the book, you need to protect your own nervous system, because you're going to try and co-regulate with your
Yeah.
child. So you need to have your own safety for yourself. And what I mean by safety is feeling like, okay, I'm regulated enough. I can support my child. I can do what I need to do. I suppose a thought just occurred to me there in relation to the book, and just thinking of kind of the course of your life and where you are now, because I suppose your children are older now. And this is just something that would often come up when I would talk to parents. They'll often talk about a little, I suppose, a feeling of loneliness. For any parents listening, does that eventually subside? And do you find your own people, or like your own, I would call it tribe, but would you find your own community eventually, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I didn't really know anybody with an autistic child. It was, when my son was first diagnosed, it was, we're talking like 20 years ago. So there really wasn't, social media wasn't as it is now. So I did feel incredibly isolated. I remember a health visitor of mine who gave me the number of a friend who ran a support group for autistic people, autistic children. And I spoke to her, and she was the first person I spoke to who really got it. And so, yeah, I felt very isolated. And I think over the years, and not in any deliberate way, but friends have kind of dropped away because our lives are so different. And it's not necessarily there's been any big fallout. It's just, I think as parents, we stop reaching out sometimes because if we have to cancel, or we know we can't take our child somewhere because they're going to have a meltdown, you're trying to explain it, having people that don't get it, I think is really tiring. So it was so important to me that I did create a community around me. I mean, now, although I probably don't need that support as much, having those amazing parents around me, I say to them, it fills my cup as well. And it's so important, as you say, about a tribe. That's what I feel like. I feel like we've got the Instagram page is absolutely amazing. There are so many parents that really, find support there with each other and with me. And then our community of parents that is called the Autism Parenting Revolution, where it's such a beautiful space. And that's, I think for me, that's what I'm creating, what I wanted back then. The younger me would have absolutely loved to have had those conversations with parents and be able to say, I had to clean poo off the walls this morning before I even, before 6 o'clock. And someone said, oh God, yeah, I get that. And I didn't have that. And I didn't really have anybody, although I had a very supportive family and I did have friends. It did feel very lonely, and it did feel like I was out there on my own parenting. So yeah, I definitely relate to that. And it's a big part of why I do what I do now. I think it's healing the younger me as well.
I feel like I can kind of relate to you through my heart, because you're definitely a number of years ahead of me, because my eldest has only just turned 18, so I have a lot of younger children. But gosh, if someday I am the powerhouse that you are, I will be so very, very thankful and proud. But I suppose the word that came to my mind, we're thinking about tribe there. It's like you're like a warrior. Like you've been through the wars, you've fought the battles, you've advocated for your children, you've stood up against expectation, you've created a path that works, you've created an incredible community. So that, and I would say the same myself from being on social media. I love the fact that I get to be, to chat on your page, or to like or post or whatever it is, like a post or share a post. But it also, for families listening, they feel part of your community. But you're kind of guiding people along, because for many parents starting out, although I know we've moved on and it was 20, 30 years ago when your gorgeous children were being identified as autistic, but there's still a lot of loneliness in the community, and there's so much information available now that it's very overwhelming, I'm sure. I suppose I'm a long time on the road as well, but for parents starting out, they'll always say to me they feel isolated, they feel overwhelmed, they don't know where do you start and what does it all mean. And that's why I genuinely think, and anyone that listens to the podcast knows, and if you're watching the video format, you'll definitely know, I only read really great books, and I only recommend really great books. And that's why I genuinely think anyone listening, a parent, professional, family member, this is the book to get for someone in your life that is raising incredible autistic children, or teenagers or adults. But also as a professional, I think it gives great insight to the lived experience and to the I would say the traumas, I would say the tribulations, but also the triumphs and where you are now. It's almost, maybe this is just my visual mind. It's like watching a whole story of someone's life, but there's so much more still to tell, as you would say. I suppose going back to the book then, for anybody listening, I suppose, are there any key advice pieces if I was a parent starting out today? Say I was told today my gorgeous Max was autistic. Is there any advice, say specifically that you know is in the book that maybe you could give to a parent like myself as maybe say 2-3 advice pieces that maybe would help me on my journey now starting out?
Okay, so I'd say the first thing is about picking your battles. I think if you know that you're going to have a meltdown on your hands, if you get your child to clean their teeth this morning, then it's okay to let that go. I think that's really important to help with your capacity. I think the other thing is your sense of identity is really important, because I think you lose that as a parent of an autistic child, because you become everything for that child. You become carer, you become psychologist, speech therapist. You have to be everything other than, when you just want to be parent. And I think that can be really overwhelming, and we lose ourselves along the way. And there's a chapter in the book about burnout, and also talking about actually how you're important, your nervous system is important. And if you can make time for some of those things that bring you joy, then I think that's really important. And that's why I think community is so great, because we can lift each other up along the way as well. But also listen to your instincts. Your instincts are always right. Go with your gut. If you know that something is going to work for your child, then go for it. If you go with what you see, not with what you're told necessarily. If you're told that screen time is really bad for your child, but you're seeing it, that's the only thing that will help them stay in their bed at night and get them to sleep, then that doesn't matter. I was so judged for things like that. But at the end of the day, we just need to get through the day. And sometimes picking our battles and doing things like that is what actually keeps us afloat. So, trust yourself. And I hope the book as a whole, that's what I hope it gives parents, is that trust and confidence that we maybe have lost along the way.
It absolutely does. And as you say, it gives you permission to parent differently. It gives you permission, I think, also to have, and that's what I get when I chat to you. I feel this deep, I suppose, compassion. It just flows from you. So to have compassion for yourself as a parent, have compassion that sometimes you might meet people along the way that may unintentionally say things or do things meaning well, but unintentionally doing harm, to be able to pull back, set boundaries, and I suppose more than anything, to not have to try and live up to expectations that don't apply to you or your family. For anyone listening, do you want to maybe, from your perspective, what is the book about? And I suppose, why is it valuable to the incredible parents in our community?
So for me, the book is 3 things. It's a permission slip so that parents can drop that guilt and stop comparing themselves to those neurotypical expectations of parenting. I really want it to be a conversation. So it's like sitting down with a cup of tea with another parent, where you get answers to all of those questions that you just want to ask. I hope that they'll get answered in there. But also it's a toolkit as well, something for you to build as you go through the book. So you get the theory, but you also get some strategy, some real life things that work. So it's a permission slip, it's a conversation, and it's a toolkit, and it's the courage to do it differently. If I had to sum it up, that's what it is.
So Lisa, thank you so much for being on the podcast here with me today. For anyone listening or watching the video format of this podcast, I'll have all of the details below about Lisa's book, her community, her social media, and her website. So huge thanks to Lisa, and absolutely everybody listening or watching the video format, definitely pop out and get a copy of her incredible new book. And huge thanks to Lisa for allowing me to read. I feel very special. I suppose an early edition of it before it went to, I suppose it's being published in August. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, you can pre-order now, so it's available to pre-order. Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah, so end of August. Yeah,
brilliant. So again, I'm one of the lucky people that got to read it before it went to publish. So I'm so lucky. So thank you so much. So thanks to Lisa, and thanks to everyone for listening. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.